Is it recording? It's recording.
Hello.
Check.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. So I'm going to explain this whole immune system thing to you right here. Here's this flow chart. I outlined the whole thing. For you to do well tomorrow, you should be able to, tomorrow and the next day, you should be able to follow along with what's going on in this. And you should understand what's going on and be able to explain this flow chart. Okay? I don't know why I have this premonition. Thanks. That's a beautiful pass. Okay. I don't know why I have this feeling, but it just for some reason I have this feeling that your free response may be 2 questions tomorrow, and like it's going to be 2 of the shorter free responses, and one of them may have to do with immune system. I don't know where that feeling came from. I don't know why. I have that feeling, that premonition. Okay. You good, Caesar?
Oh, I was listening to the
Okay.
baseball game.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So, immune system can be divided into 2 big groups. I can have acquired immunity, which is specific, or I can have innate immunity, which is non-specific. So, non-specific immunity, there are 2 lines of defense. All right. The first line of defense is going to be my skin, my sweat, my tears, my mucus. All right. All of that are physical barriers that just keep stuff out. That's my first line of defense, my innate immunity. Okay. So all that stuff that just says, hey, let's not even let it get in there. And then I can have my second line of defense because sometimes that stuff gets penetrated or that it's infiltrated. And so when I get into my second line of defense, one of the first things that I can have is called inflammation, swelling. And with inflammation, it happens because of histamines. That's why you'll take antihistamines, because that means your nasal cavities are going and they've swollen shut. So you take an antihistamine to reduce that swelling. All right, it stops those histamines, and so it stops that swelling. And when we're doing that swelling, it's sending all these white blood cells there. Another thing that can happen is fever. So you have mast cells which stimulate metabolism, and it's going to cause the body's overall temperature to increase. And so it's going to get hotter and hotter and hotter and hotter. And it's eventually going to try and denature those proteins that we have that are causing us our harm, those pathogens. We don't want them, so we're going to try and cook those proteins out and change their shape. And so that's what mast cells are going to do with fever. Then, if neither of those work, what I have are certain white blood cells that are non-specific, meaning they don't really care what the pathogen is. They're just going to try and consume it. Those are what's called phagocytes, right? And there's 3 big types. There's macrophages, there's neutrophils, and there's dendritic cells. All you need to know is all 3 of those fall under the category of phagocytes. You don't need to know specifically like, oh, well, this one's going to be when it's chronic problems that involve inflammation, and this one's going to be like short-term inflammation. That would be more of an anatomy thing. But you need to know that all 3 of those are going to be types of phagocytes. Phagocytosis is going to be cell eating, meaning this white blood cell sees a pathogen and it's going to come up and it's going to engulf it. And it's going to digest it. It's going to break it down. And then once it's done with that, it's going to take all those parts from that recently digested pathogen and it's going to present it on the outside. All right, that little broken part of that pathogen, that antigen, binds with an MHC and it presents it on the outside and it becomes an antigen presenting cell, all right, or an APC. Because now it's saying, hey, here's what I've killed, here's what's on the outside of me, all right? And that's where we end with second line of defense. So all of that was non-specific. It didn't care what it was whatsoever, all right? It just did it to everything. And then something's going to come along and bind with that antigen presenting cell, a helper T cell, all right? Helper T cells are specific. Remember, if you look at those receptors on the outside, not everything can bind with that. It's only specific helper T cells for that. So it plugs into that, and then it's going to stimulate the production of one of 2 things. Something's popping off over there. Okay.
JK got out of jail.
It's true. Yes, ma'am. Mast. M-A-S-T. Okay.
Write that down.
So helper T cell is going to bind with that antigen that's presented on the outside. And it's going to do one of 2 things. It's either going to stimulate the cell-mediated response or it's going to stimulate the humoral response. If it stimulates the cell-mediated response, it's going to make something called cytotoxic T cells or killer T cells. Meaning if that cell is infected, death to you. I'm going to kill you. All right? Because it doesn't want that cell just sitting there making like a factory. Making more cells. Don't knock that over because that phone's leaned against it. The one that's recording this for the YouTube later because people wanted it
Stop
later.
touching things.
Okay. And so it's going to kill all those infected cells because it's saying like, oh, well, viruses, when they're undergoing their life cycle, it's just going to use those cells. So if I kill that cell, that virus can't replicate anymore. All right, so that's what killer T cells do. Then I can have B cells. B cells can go one of two pathways. They can either go directly towards making antibodies right now, and then those antibodies deactivate the pathogen, or B cells can go into become making memory B cells. What memory B cells are going to be is, if you remember when we looked at that diagram of antibody numbers based on first exposure and second exposure, during first exposure, you don't have many antibodies because you've never seen it before. You don't remember how to fight it. But then come the second exposure, you form what are called memory B cells. And you've already seen this before. You already know how to make the antibodies that are very specific for this thing. And so now your body's just going to start pumping out antibodies that it already knows how to make. And so your antibody levels go super high, super quick, because it doesn't have to spend time figuring out how to do it. It already knows how to do it. Therefore, if you get exposed to something the second time, chances are you're going to get over it much, much, much quicker because your body already knows how to fight it. And that's our immune system. Any questions? Not all at once.
I like that.
Wow, what a great audience.
How was your weekend?
My week was great. Thanks
Can
for
you
asking.
repeat all
Miguel?
of it?
What are we doing after this?
We're going to go over Unit 1 stuff. Because the other day we did the vocab for Unit 2, we're going to go over Unit 1 stuff. Any immune system questions? Before I stop the video?
Can we go over Unit 2?
Hi guys, make sure you like and subscribe to Alan's channel.